So up next, we have a return caller, Steven from Washington. Pronouns are he, him. Excuse me, Jesus Christ. Steven, you are live.
How can we help you this week?
Hey, I'm sure you saw the notes in the call screeners deal there, but the past couple of times that I've called, I just kind of gave you guys a brief overview of everything that's going on with our family, and I didn't really break down much of the details. One, because my daughter wasn't really sure how much she was comfortable with me sharing. She's fine with me pretty much elaborating as much as I need to kind of make this point here. But I felt like I made the whole process sound a lot more easy and straightforward than it ever was.
To cut in, could you just like summarize it just for like the viewers and just to remind us like what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, when my daughter started having signs of puberty, she was kind of an early bloomer. She actually had her first period at I think she had just turned 9 2 months before that happened. So that was kind of I don't know if traumatic is the right word, but it was a very confusing experience for her. Yeah. We kind of assumed that was normal. She's our only kid, so girls being uncomfortable with their menstruation is a normal thing, as far as she thought. As time went on, and she started developing more, she became very distressed by various changes in her body, getting breasts, having just in various different ways that she was growing kind of concerned her. So we started getting her into counseling, and by the time she was 12, she had already been on puberty blockers, and we had gotten those straightened out. And then eventually we went into HRT and kind of proceeded from there. Once she felt like she had control over her body and how that whole process was going and her puberty was stopped, she felt comfortable continuing her biological puberty, and to this day still remains agnostic to her gender, as she explains it to me. There's another word that she uses for it, but it confuses me. So gender agnostic is kind of how she's explained it to me, and that's how I go forward with that.
What's the other word? If you don't want to say.
I can't remember exactly how it was she explained it. There were a couple of different terms that she used, like agender, but that was kind of a more complicated discussion. But gender agnostic just kind of made sense to me, in that she doesn't really know what gender she is, and she's just going to proceed going forward, kind of just doing her. But there were a couple of things that I had written down about our experience in Washington, at least. Washington, in and of itself, makes this whole process pretty straightforward, actually.
Good. Yeah, they've got good healthcare, for sure.
Yeah, we're on the public healthcare system. And they actually provide for most of the treatments that we needed. So expense-wise, not something we were super concerned about. If you're doing it without healthcare or insurance, it's going to be thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
She originally got on GnRH. That was after a couple months of therapy and consultation, which is necessary for the insurance. They won't let you get puberty blockers without that, which I totally understand. Got to make sure that, what we're dealing with is in fact what we're dealing with. And after that, same kind of deal, waiting period on that, more therapy, more consultation. And then she eventually got onto Lupron injections. And this was at the gender clinic in Seattle. She did get a couple at our local Planned Parenthood, which they were a godsend, and they do provide those services. For anybody that thinks that they don't have a gender clinic anywhere near them, if you have a Planned Parenthood, they do that too. I'm not sure how it would cooperate with everybody's insurance, but that's besides the point. And then detransitioning was really straightforward. Like we said that we were going to proceed without it. They weaned her off of the cross-sex hormones, and bing, bang, boom. We were basically in the process of transitioning to fully detransitioned in a matter of months. So that's basically the healthcare side. Multiple checkups throughout that entire process to check on bone density and blood work. So you're going to get pricked with a lot of needles, and it's going to be really inconvenient. Like you're doing these checkups multiple times a month. It's not an easy thing for anybody that talks about transition and detransition as this flippant thing. It's a pain in the ass for everyone involved.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to say, Stephen, like, I know we said this last time you called in, but I really appreciate your calls because we deal with these people who all the time who treat like what we talk about, like, oh yeah, you can get on hormone blockers and come off of them. That's a thing that happens. And people act like we're the ones who are being flippant. But like, it's amazing how they'll like say, oh, well, you just shouldn't be allowed to get on these things at all because of the risk of regretting. But like, it sounds like what you've just described is your child going through the system that is built to allow them to figure out who the fuck they are. Your kid put the pieces together and was able to use medication as was necessary and then come off of it as was necessary. And it's not an easy process, but the system, like these standards of care are so elaborate and so detailed and have been so structured for quite a long time that the fact that we are having this like resurgence of panic about the access of healthcare for trans minors is just beyond what I can understand, because these systems are so well structured, and although it is very invasive and though it is very time consuming, like it sounds like you didn't have to maybe do like a whole lot of research yourself once you found the right professional. They said, nope, we're going to give you this recommendation. You go here. And it's the standards of care are like they are for any other medical thing that someone undergoes. They're very well established.
Right. There are healthcare providers that aren't necessarily completely up to pace. They're the kind of the old guard that will do these procedures, but they do it begrudgingly. They don't use proper pronouns. Like you can tell they're not quite in step with everything that's going on. But the people out at the Seattle Gender Clinic, they do fantastic work. If I could advocate for them to be the golden standard across the country, I would say with a few minor tweaks, I would totally stand by that decision.
That's awesome.
This just sounds so alien to me.
The thing I really wanted to hit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. The thing I really wanted to hit though was I kind of fell into the whole paranoia about all this in the beginning. It's just because I didn't know. For anybody that has those concerns, the GnRH treatment, it's probably the most common hormone blocker out there. I actually don't know of any other ones that are regularly prescribed. The only side effects are some issues with bone density and hormone levels continuing if they are on the hormone blocker longer than like 3 to 4 years.
Yes.
My daughter was on them only a couple months before they started treating her with cross-sex hormones and continued taking them even during the cross-sex hormone treatment and still had no side effects. This is going to affect people differently no matter who you are. It really, really depends on physiology and just each individual person's body. But it is considered exceptionally safe, and in my case, I can advocate for that being the case.
Yeah.
I did want to touch on a couple family things, and then that's pretty much all I had to say. But that's it for the medical side of things.
Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch on that. Like, okay. I've had debates over this stuff, and constantly people are complaining about the potential side effects, and I have said the same thing, and I've even given a smaller window than you just gave us, Stephen, and I'm assuming your information is probably more up to date considering you were just with the doctors. But the research I had heard was like 2 years on the GnRH agonist. If there's even less of a concern until 3 or 4 years, that makes the point even stronger, which just makes me laugh. But anyway, Katie, do you want to have a point before we get any family info?
I guess my point on that is, like, we see this all the time in the UK. Well, my first point is, like, what sounds like what you're describing in Washington sounds like amazing. It sounds like it's actually up to standard with the international healthcare, because here in the UK, it's absolutely disgusting. And, like, we are a million miles away from that. You know, we might as well not have healthcare for trans kids here because it's so bad. But, yeah, I think this, like, when people say, oh, what about bone density? Like, for sure, it's worth knowing the side effects. It's actually important, and we should, like, do something about them. But you trying to tell me that, like, it would be better if I had, like, 5% stronger bones and was a man? Like, would you like, is that what you're saying? Would you trade your sexual characteristics for slightly stronger bones? Like, is that the argument here? Anyway, that's another thing. Stephen, go ahead.
Okay. And just a last note on that. Her cross-sex hormones and the GnRH treatment, they could have been some complicating circumstances around there. So if you're just taking hormone blockers, it might be closer to 2 years. But in her case, they said it wasn't anything to be concerned about for 3 or 4 years if she continued to need it. If you're on cross-sex hormones regularly enough, there will become a point where you won't necessarily have to be on the puberty blockers anymore, but that's never something that we encountered, so I can't really speak to that. On the family side of things, I want to be very, very clear for anybody that believes that parents that are trying to fight on their kid's side for this shit. It's not about just letting the kid run wild and do whatever they want. The number of times I heard people comparing me to let my daughter transition to letting her smoke crack or date a 30-year-old is fucking exhausting to explain how just it's so wrong, and it's so completely contrary to the actual experience of watching your kid tear herself apart and just have it's extremely painful for the people that are going through it. And I've heard people's direct testimony, and I've heard my daughter talk about this and tell me how hard it is to go through this experience, and then have people describe it to me as I'm being a bad parent because I'm letting her just do whatever she wants, and she doesn't have the judgment to make these decisions. She has the judgment to tell me that she wants to cut her own breasts off and wishes every night she'd rather be dead than a female anymore. Like, you can't fucking say that shit. It's just
it's so ignorant,
blatantly wrong.
Yeah, cruel. I mean, even people told my mom that same thing when I was a teenager, and it's terrible. Like, my mom was like the one person in my hometown of like 2,000 people. This whole area, like 2,000 people. She was the one person who treated me like a human, and people called her a bad mom. Like, that's fucking crazy. And I totally empathize so deeply with like the pain and how hard that must be for you as a parent to see your kid going through that, and to know that there's lawmakers out there who are trying to make you doing the best for your kid considered abuse. Like, that is why I do this show. That right there. Because hearing like the pain in your voice, like it's fucking insane. People don't understand how painful it can be to have the trans experience in a place that's unaccepting. And when parents are trying to do the best from what little info is out there on trans people, and we have good data, but like obviously it could be better. It's terrible. And wow, I think that this is probably the best call I feel like we've had on here. This is like hitting in a really deep place.
Yeah, please keep going, Stephen.
I appreciate you guys giving people like us the ability to speak out about this. I honestly can't remember if I used a pseudonym last time or not. We actually got outed at church, so I don't really care anymore. And she, is doing her own thing, and luckily the people at school are really fucking awesome about it. And our church is actually fairly liberal as well. We're Episcopalian, so go them. But yeah, it's the fact that there are people in my own family, my own parents, her grandparents, both sets of them voted for Trump twice. And we just don't speak to them anymore. We can't. I can see that there is some kind of love for their granddaughter. And I know that they think that this whole thing is just a phase. And I know that they don't respect my decisions as a parent. And, they can say that they love us as much as they want. But I don't know how you can say something like that and then act the way they do. So, I'm glad that we found some other adoptive family that will actually accept all of us. And that's just kind of what you might have to do if you're facing this. Like, realistically, there's no way that we can, or no way that I found yet to make them understand that this is just, it's a legitimate treatment. It's the responsible thing to do. And the fact that she detransitioned isn't a reflection of the ineffectiveness of it. It's what allowed her to continue being a fucking kid and not having to feel the way that she did.
Absolutely.
But
yeah,
this was all kind of a rant, and I'm sorry about that.
No,
but I just really needed to put a voice to that, because the last couple of times that I've called in, I've just been like, oh man, everything's so great and wonderful. It's like, no, it fucking wasn't. It sucked a lot.
Yeah. Well, no, I really appreciate you going on the rant. Like, it wasn't a rant. Like, it was very structured and it was great. But like, I really appreciate hearing your story, because the only stories we see, about this kind of thing are the fear-mongering about detransition and it being treated as like someone ruining their life. Like, that's how, the anti-trans people want to spin it. That, any kind of, you were going in this direction and you change your mind and go in this direction. It's seen as like, this person is now broken, ruined. It's something like, it's evidence that we should ban, treatment for trans people. And that isn't the majority of the stories at all. And we just don't hear them because there's, they don't get platformed. So I think it's really important to hear these stories. And then often in response, the only stories you hear from trans people are people who, transition and things go well and they come out the other side of it. And often because they're the only ones who have the, I guess, I don't want to say only ones who have the strength. They're the only ones who are, it's an easier story to tell, I guess, is how I'd say it. And so we end up seeing these like two very binary narratives of like, you either transition your success or you detransition, you're a failure, and it's just nonsense. And so I think it's really good to hear from, you know, it's a journey, and finding out where you are going to end up might not be where you think you're going to end up, but that doesn't mean that the journey was wrong to do. So no, I really appreciate hearing it. Like sometimes you've just got to find out.
Stephen, your story I think is so quintessential to what I want this show to do, that it feels painful to me. Like I'm going to cry even harder at the fact that we do have to move on.
Oh no!
Because we have 3 more calls, and I don't know if we're going to get to all of them, but we really want to try. So I'm going to have to say goodbye, Stephen, but thank you so much for the call.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys for, talking with me and giving me the ability to say it. I really appreciate everything you do. You're awesome. So have a good one.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye.
No problem, Stephen. Thank you for calling.
Oh my God. I am okay.
Good.
But that was definitely, I've said it this will be the 3rd time. That's the core of why I do any trans activism. Like knowing what I went through and what it sounds like they went through, and being like, no one should have to go through that shit for just trying to figure out who the fuck they are. Like, why is anyone punished for that? It's insane. And
sick. Yeah.
That's why I do this stuff, because I want to move society in a direction where that doesn't happen as often. And, maybe it's conceited thinking a show like this can do that, but, maybe there's small steps.
One person in the audience to hear your story and Stephen's story, and then maybe they will be a doctor or a lawmaker or just a friend, and it can make a difference. So